This semester, one of the projects for the course is to complete a Heritage Language Learner profile. The intent is for you to complete it for your school, and then it's due on February the 23rd of this semester. Some of you are in schools together or in situations where there's more than one of you in your school. So in that situation, I would like for one of you to take your school. The other could complete this project related to the feeder school that comes into your school, or if you're in a lower grade school, you could work to gather this information for the school that your school feeds into. Another consideration would be for you to collect this information or review this information for your district. And with that, you could work with district personnel in the ESL office or in student services where they collect, or student assessment where they collect a variety of different student information. Then you could seek their assistance in completing this. And I will say that many of you will probably find that your ESL teacher or the person who provides ESL services, whether they're there full-time or periodically, will be one of your first go-to people on this project. The next might be your data manager or your registrar. If not them, then the assistant principal or team leader who leads those data reviews and really looks at the student population in your school and has access of ways to pull various reports. For your school, you will identify several different components. Here you see a list of the first 4 components that you'll need to look for. First is the number of languages represented in your school. And I would even see if you can go far enough not only to get that number, but to have a list. I know in our school district, the ESL office, we maintain a wide variety of information in our database of our ELL students. And I know in several of your districts, your ESL departments and leaders have collected information related to the language backgrounds and countries of origin of your students. So there shouldn't take too much work to get this information. It just may be knowing the right person to go to. So the number of languages, and again, if you could get a list of what those languages are, then include that as well. Second is to consider the countries of origin represented in your school. And interestingly enough, you may find that there are students you never knew may have not been born in the United States or have a more international experience than we realize actually in your school. The third is to look at the number and collect the number of the limited English proficient students, the former limited English proficient students, and then the known floaty students at your school. And to explain, limited English proficient students are those students who have not demonstrated proficiency in English on the Access for ELLs here in the state of Alabama. So they have not scored a 4.8 or higher on that exam. The former limited English proficient students, some will be newly exited as recent as this past fall based on the results from last spring's assessment. Others may be in their second year of being monitored, and others may have been exited for several years. I know in many of our situations, particularly at the upper grades, we will have twice as many students who are FLEP as we have who are students who are LEP based on their educational experience with us and having come beginning school with us as kindergartners. Known floaty, that status, that acronym actually stands for National Origin Minority, Primary Home Language Other than English. And those students have a language other than English in their background, but upon assessing their language proficiency in English, never demonstrated a need to receive ESL services. So they've never been considered limited English proficient. And so, again, you'll likely be surprised some students that you really had no idea were known floaties who may actually wind up having a language other than English in their background in your schools. Fourth is to consider the number of heritage language learners, particularly when you're considering the other project that we'll be working on in proposing a course. So, of Spanish, if your proposal deals with a Spanish for native speakers or French for native speakers course, German for native speakers, consider what those numbers may be as far as participation. It may be, I'm not familiar with an influx of immigrants, say, who are refugees from different parts of Africa and other places, but when you consider schools in Georgia and in the Midwest where they've had a big refugee population where all of a sudden they have students who have French in their background, and so they might be developing a French for native speakers course based on the fact that the students are from countries where French is their language. But look at that number of heritage language learners, and so kind of a key there is it may be a conglomeration of those LEP, FLEP, and non-floaty students. But as we're learning in that spread of what a heritage language learner or heritage language speaker is, taking into consideration what their background and ability would be to be successful in a Spanish for native speakers course or a heritage course for their particular language group. These last 4 components will probably be a little more involved. It may actually move you beyond just working with a colleague who has access to this information to working with them to inquire of this information of their students, or for you to interact then with the heritage language speakers to learn, or heritage language learners to gather this information about them. So the 5th component that you want to look at is the educational background of the heritage language learners in your school. For example, you may have a large population of students who are now 9th graders, but they've been with you since, or been with us in school in the U.S. since they were kindergartners. But you might be in a situation where that's not the case, and most of them were more recent arrivals in the last year to 3 years. And so looking at number 6, knowing how long they've been in school in the U.S., but then also knowing, did they have school before they came here? Many of our students coming now from Central America, we're finding, have had either multiple year gaps of education, or they've never had the opportunity to go to school at all. And so then looking at the students, learning about the background that they're coming from, because interestingly enough, as we get older students internationally, not only do we encounter that many have had limited educational background, but that some, when you look at their transcripts, that they take 5 more courses a year than our students take in a shorter school day. And we can always argue different aspects of that, but where students have multiple language courses in a year, they take 3 different sciences every year. Math is typically called math. It's not dichotomized the way we have it with algebra, trigonometry, geometry, all of that. But just considering what their educational experience has been, possibly if they could tell you, was it designed on the American system, the German system, the French educational system, or the British system, because depending on where the students are coming from, they may have been in a school that was designed to meet a specific model. Then component number 7, because I mentioned number 6 of the average years of school in the U.S. Component number 7 is their literacy level, kind of gleaning what their ability is in reading and writing in that heritage language. Do they read at all in it? Do they write at all in it? Or do they not? And that will probably take, again, a conversation where they kind of evaluate what their abilities are and them telling you that. And then the last is for you to look at your school's performance on accountability measures in meeting the needs of heritage language learners and language minority students over the previous 5 years. So by that, looking at your AYP reports for ELL specifically, again, working with the ESL teacher, knowing how the school did on their annual measurable achievement objectives for Title III, which deals with language acquisition and progress over time and demonstrating proficiency, as well as demonstrating academic proficiency. So looking at those various state assessment reports that we've been using, and I know we're moving away from those, but it helps us look at the gap between our heritage language learners and our English speakers and consider their needs as we consider culturally responsive instruction. The conclusion of your research will be to put together a presentation. I'm asking that you put together either a PowerPoint, a Prezi, or another form of slideshow presentation to present the data that you have found. The format is your call. Again, I hope that you're able to include as much of the information for the 8 components. I'm not going to get into number of slides. It's your design in the manner in which you present the information that you found. The presentations will be posted in Canvas by the conclusion of the day on February the 23rd. And I'll provide further instructions of where and how that needs to occur. So that way, once you've posted your presentation, not only am I able to review it, but your classmates can see the information that you found, so that in this way we can compare and consider the differences in some of our situations, because one school may be experiencing an influx of students from Vietnam, for example, whereas another may be experiencing an influx of Spanish speakers. Or, as I know some of you have mentioned, you have schools who seem to be like the miniature UN, where it's very diverse, where other schools predominantly have an ELL population that are strictly Spanish speakers. So once your presentations are posted up, as I mentioned, then we'll be able to make that comparison. But really the key here is to consider our student populations in developing and implementing instruction that is culturally and linguistically responsive to them.